In 1984, Iron Crown Enterprises published the Middle-earth role-playing game and had the license until 1999. My friend RJ introduced me to the game in the 90s, and I played in the games he ran. The rules are a variation of the Rolemaster role-playing game system. Today, RJ and I are rereading the Middle-earth role-playing game, or MERP for short, and asking ourselves if this game still holds up. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny.
And I'm RJ.
And today we're going to look at Middle-earth Role-Playing Game by ICE. But yeah, I have good memories of the game, of playing it. And I remember you running this, and I remember the adventures being a lot of fun, and pretty dangerous. So I became exposed to this game through you. How did you find out about this game?
Walden Books. Yeah, I mean, I just walked into the bookstore, which every mall had back in the olden days, and they had a role-playing section, and I saw the box set, Middle-earth Role-Playing. It had a nice illustration, and I just immediately bought it. And yeah, it was the only Middle-earth role-playing. In fact, that's how Iron Crown Enterprises got the license, is because nobody had ever asked before for a role-playing game license. And so the Tolkien estate was like, sure, I guess. And they got that license back in '84, and they had it for till like 2000. So they published a lot of supplements over the years.
They did. I think one of the things I want to talk about is whether or not the books are still could be relevant in our role-playing games today. One of the things I like best about MERP is that they had so many books, they had so many locations available, and you can play not only almost in any particular setting or a region of Middle Earth, but even different timelines as well. So if you want to play in the fourth age, you can do so. If you want to play somewhere between the second and third age, you can do so. I mean, they have a book about Moria, and I think that's really fantastic. And I've been waiting for an updated book for that for the longest, and I think Free League is finally producing something later this year. But for the longest, if I want to learn about, or if anyone asks me about playing or running Moria, something like it, I have to go to find that original Moria source book.
Yeah, because they had the license for so long and put out so many source books, they covered so much material. And even today, you can get as a collector, you can get like all the maps and stuff. They have very detailed maps of the worlds, all of the lands, and huge poster maps. They had an expanded world map that went beyond what's canon. Um, so there's a lot of material that you can draw on, which is great. The system, used the Rollmaster system, which was invented by Iron Crown Enterprises, which originally was developed as house rules to advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So it had very similar mechanics to, it was a tactical high fantasy game basically brought into Middle Earth. But we can talk about that.
I looked at this book again after, wow, I don't think I've looked at this since, I would say about 15, 16 years. So I was looking at this again and I realized something. It's kind of like when I was when I was playing Temple of Elemental Evil a few years ago. I was running that and I wanted to use first edition advanced D&D. And I've realized that reading the original core rulebook is difficult. I don't know if it's just the layout, but the rules are, I don't like using the word crunchy, but if crunchy had an example, the Rollmaster system would be probably the poster child of crunchy when it comes to rules. There's a lot of things to read about and how to. If I remember correctly, making characters was so took some time.
It did. But even running the game just in a session was really difficult as a game master. A game master screen wasn't going to help you because there are in the core rulebook, which is not very big, it's like 100 something pages. There are 63 charts and tables, right? Not including the spell lists and stuff like that, or the monster stat blocks. 63 charts and tables. So you've got, well, let's talk about the most famous table, like the critical tables, right? Critical tables for every damage type, there's a critical table. And you have fumble tables too for each type of thing you could be doing. And each table has almost 20 items in it that could happen. So if you're using a slashing weapon, you get a critical. There's different kinds of criticals. You roll, it gets modified by the type of critical. Something amazing happens. And in fact, and the results could be quite punishing. And if I remember correctly, that party you mentioned, you were the recipient of a pretty terrible critical, and I think you were hobbling around on one good leg for like three-quarters of the adventure,
Oh,
which is
it was one good arm. I remember because
oh
I was an elven ranger with, and my specialty was the bow, and I couldn't use my bow because I broke my arm because I fumbled.
yeah, some these are really, I think, classic examples from this game that people still remember. Like for crushes, it'll be something like blow to shield, shoulder breaks shield. If no shield, shoulder broken, arm useless. Right? That might have been what happened to you. Um, Or puncture has one that's like strike to side of head, knocked out for 6 hours, which is a long time, plus 10 hits. That's not good. If no helm, dies instantly. Oh, okay, well, maybe we should be all be wearing helms now, right? And the fumbles could be equally troublesome. Um, the worst fumble was a movement fumble, or if you're doing some movie maneuver, it was difficult. And it just says your fall turns into a dive, you crush your skull and die. So yeah, so there was tables for all of that. Even skill checks had to refer to a table to see what the result of a skill check was. And in combat, all your two hit rolls referred to tables based on the armor type you were trying to hit, and that table gave you the amount of damage for that hit and the critical type for that hit. So tables everywhere. Um, in 2024, no, that's just it's too slow of a pace. It's too much cognitive load for a game master. And but those critical hits and fumbles tables, people love those.
Hmm.
If you go to DM's Guild today, there's over a dozen of those products that people have made for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, which doesn't have such a thing, but they wanted to add it in.
Oh yeah, those charts I think were the best part of combat because if you roll well, it's exciting. If you roll terribly, it's still exciting. You may die, still exciting. And we still joke around about what was it that you trip on a turtle shell and break your neck? That's like one of the worst things that could happen to you or
Yeah, yeah,
something.
there's one. It's very strangely worded. You stumble over an unseen dead imaginary turtle or something like that.
The rules are a bit crunchy. It does take some time to relearn them. It's I kind of look at this kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, where I never read the books to learn to play the game. I have to play the game with someone to learn to play the game first, and then I understood the rules.
Speaking of character creation, one of the things that stood out to me in this book is the number of character options that are available for races and cultures. So in a core rule book, a very small one, we have 22 races slash cultures to choose from, excluding the orcs and the trolls and the half orcs. And most of those were human cultures. So there was a huge amount of variety for people playing human race, but having different cultures that were very unique and exciting to play. Now, I think the Noldor High Elves in this were noticeably more powerful than all the
Hmm.
other races. So that might be a power balance issue. But having a lot of character creation options is great, even in like modern times. Most core rule books don't have so many options for character creation. And when they do, it really stands out. People really enjoy, oh, look at all these options I have. Players love to have a lot of options for their characters.
The one class and the one class that I didn't like to play in this was the wizard, which they may call it something different here. I forgot the exact term, but the magic user class that was available here. I remember that was my first class I played here, and it's tough because you only have one spell to start with. And I remember I chose sleep, and it's great when it works, and it's horrible when it doesn't. um, and I remember to gain a level in Merc is difficult. Um, I do love that even if you get damaged, you get experience from being damaged. I think that's a great thing, and I wish more role playing games had that, so that the idea that even if you're hurt, even if you lose, you still get experience points from that. I think that's pretty revolutionary for the time this came out. But gaining a level, but I wanted so many more spells, but having stuck with one, it was difficult. I actually like what One Ring did. I'm not sure what Decipher did, but I like what the One Ring role playing game with what Cubicle 7 and Free League did, where they took out magic users completely. Because that felt more like Lord of the Rings to me, at times. Because in Lord of the Rings, obviously, Maiar were the magicians of the world, and they were a separate race from humanity.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest flaws in this game was that it was taken from Rolemaster slash AD&D inspired, so it was high fantasy inspired and in a Middle Earth setting. So spellcasting was there, but the spellcasting worked a little bit differently, which I thought actually has some really interesting and fun aspects. So spellcasters, they don't choose which spells to learn. They choose spell lists, right?
Mm.
And so when you chose that spell list, it just happened to have sleep as the very first level one spell. And each list is 10 spells. And so you get one each level. So once you have a list, you just automatically, as you level up, get the next spell on that list. So all the lists have a theme, such as like light law, which is all light related spells, or wind law, which is like airbending, or protections or illusions. So if you want to get Fireball, for example, which is level 8 on the Fire Law spell list, you start with Boil Liquid at level 1, right? So, and then you learn Wall of Fire and Firebolt all on the way to Fireball. And I thought that was great for making spellcasters that had a theme or a specialty to them. And it kind of makes sense that that character specializes in that particular type of magic.
Mm.
Now, since the spell list mixed in high fantasy spell casting, like Fireball, for example, it really diverged from the Middle Earth setting. So it was like playing D&D Middle Earth. So I think, yeah, these newer systems were wise in taking that out. It doesn't have the same thematic feel as the literature does, right?
Mm.
So, and I think that in 2024, this spell list way of choosing spells, I actually really like that. Like if other games did that sort of thing, I think one-off spell selection where you pick each spell separately, like you do in Dungeons and Dragons, you can kind of see the same basic sets of spells chosen by players and ones that they really avoid. But lists, I think spell lists provide you like utility spells that are in there that you might normally pass over. But if it's in your toolbox as a character, creative players are going to use what's in their toolbox. So they're going to be using these spells that you would normally not have even taken
Mm.
because you have to take it to get something good.
Yes, and just to be clear, what I don't like was the number of spells you started with, because it's not that's not my you don't start with many choices. But yes, I love the progression of spells. I love because it forces you kind of to think about what you have and use what you have creatively. Yeah, boiling water, for example. That may not
Well,
be
imagine if that was your only spell instead of sleep. Like, how bored would you be? Yeah, I agree.
you know, but that could be a useful utility spell. That could come in handy. I'm sure there will be an instance where boiling water or boiling some sort of liquid can come in handy.
Yeah, and under very rare circumstances, you would have your one moment. Let me segue from magic into some of the alternatives. So healing magic, of course, is very important in high fantasy games, and it's also present in this game. But an alternative to healing magic in this game was the herbs and poisons, the herbalism component of this game. And I thought it was really great for filling in that gap if you played with no magic users or very little magic because there's a huge list of herbs and there's like almost 60 of them and they've got their own categories, right? So you've got like bone repair herbs and burn and exposure relief and physical enhancement herbs, and anybody can forage for herbs and prepare herbs. Of course, it depends on what terrain you're in, and some are more difficult to find. But I think added to the setting, it makes the natural world more prominent, right? Instead of relying just on spells, now you're out there looking for plants, right? And I think that's in line with the feel of the original books, where it was really focused on natural world.
Mm.
Now, most of the herbs in this game were invented for this game. Um, so there's not like you can't bring a knowledge of herbs and poisons really into this. There's no parallels really. There's a couple from the books, but that's it. But I think in 2024, like herbs is still a very fun mechanic in any game to be able to do this sort of thing, to be able to do healing things without magic, and that is accessible to anybody. Now you might have a skill or something in there. And I think the newer versions of like the One Ring, I think has an herbalism component. If I remember, there's a class that does that sort of stuff.
There's no clerics in One Ring or in the fifth edition version of the One Ring, the Lord of the Rings role playing.
Yeah, but I think this herbalism thing, I don't know. I like it. I think other people like it too. I mean, if you go to DM's Guild again, for D&D 5th edition, there's about a dozen herbs supplements that people have put together. And it's great to be able to get these effects without having to learn and use spells. It gives people more options when they play, more things they can do.
Well, let me ask you this. So this MERP uses percentiles for everything, for combat, for skills. Um, did you prefer that over? Because I remember compared to, because we played this and we played Star Wars, West End Star Wars, and compared to the combat system and rolling up characters, it's like night and day. It's just all D6s. Character creations was very easy. Do you remember that being difficult when you were running it? Or
The
MERP?
making of the characters.
Making characters and just um, whether it be skill checks or combat.
Uh, yeah, skill checks in MERP, skill checks and that sort of stuff was really difficult because of the tables, not necessarily because of the D100 system. D100 was okay. I mean, they also had open-ended rolls, which was like, you basically get like exploding dice sort of concept nowadays. So it could lead to like a little bit more addition, but you're adding larger numbers or subtracting larger numbers. But the character creation, it was difficult, but mostly because it took a while and the rules were not super clearly written on that.
Hmm.
So you had to do like your adolescent. So you pick your race slash culture that determines your adolescent skills and stuff, and then you also then choose your profession, which is your class, and then you do stuff for that as well. So it's kind of two. Plus, you get your racial, cultural stuff that's innate. So it's sort of three phases.
Hmm. Am I crazy in remembering? I remember you had the book, and we had a decent photocopy machine at school. So we would. I remember having the book, and you had all these all these charts out that you copied from the copy machine, and just have them all out in case you needed something right away.
Yeah, yeah. I had probably like a couple dozen pages in order to run this. Like you couldn't fit that on DM screen. Um, that's what it took. It was not easy, unfortunately, but the opportunity to play in Middle Earth, it was worth it, right?
Yes. So I don't want to come across as saying that, all right, the Rollmaster system is is terrible. That's because I don't want to use it. I want to use it for my games. I think rule systems, and I think it's great that we have so many, is that we could find one that tailors to our liking. So yeah, maybe Rollmaster system won't work for me, but maybe there's someone else out there like for them this is perfect. They love the amount of rules and charts and the random. I mean, I do love the randomness of the charts of what can happen, and I think that's really
Yeah.
awesome. And I wish actually more role playing games would have that.
And here we're talking, and criticals happened actually quite often in this game. They weren't just like a 5% chance like in Dungeons and Dragons. Those critical and fumble tables were being referenced often.
If I remember correctly, when we played Adventures in Middle Earth, I used to have these cards with me. They were originally, I think, part of Pathfinder First Edition, but if you rolled like a critical on
Mhm.
attacking, and depending what you use, like a range or it was close combat or something like that, I'll have a card out to say what effect it would happen, just so I could get that feel from MERP into the new Lord of the Rings games.
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to get that MERP feel, that particular MERP feel. That's the one thing about this was that this game that was really a landmark for that game. The other thing about these products in general was the artwork on the covers was really, really great, right? So the artist's name is Angus McBride, or was he passed away several years ago. He illustrated many of the covers. I don't know if he did all of them. I don't think he did all of them, but he also did some of the interior art, and the core rulebook has quite a few of his works in it. he's a fantastic character illustrator. All of his characters are usually in doing some, it's very active. There's some action happening. And the art for Tolkien's universe was much, much rarer back in the 80s, right? So there was some art, but it wasn't like now, like after the movies,
Hmm.
where we have Middle-earth art everywhere. But that art has been inspired mostly by a couple of artists who were doing that artwork before the movies. So their visions of Middle-earth have really taken into the public's mind about what Middle-earth looks like. McBride's work was at that time, I think, one of the definitive envisionings of Middle-earth, and it was on these products. If you don't know Angus McBride's artwork, you should check it out. You can just Google it, and you'll see a very distinctive style.
There's a notable called Treasures of Middle Earth, which we was talking about that image too. The cover for that, it's stupendous. And I still use that book as inspiration to this day for if I want to think about new magic items. Because
Mhm.
I think if I remember correctly, RJ, let me know if I'm wrong. I remember when we first talked about that book years ago, back in college, we were talking like maybe these items are very overpowered for your game. You know, I think they were pretty amazing and probably campaign changing magic items. That's as they should be for Middle Earth. But to this day, I kind of go back to that and see what they created for inspiration for new ideas for magic items.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful resource. I mean, it covers like the things that are in the literature, so they are like artifacts of incredible power, but it also includes a lot of like low-level magic items that are very, very unique and have a lot of flavor to them, right?
Yeah,
They're not just like stat boosts. They have something about them.
there's still a lot of things about this series, this the Middle Earth role playing game that I think maybe maybe Role Master System may not be for you, but I think there's a lot of good gems of GM tools that they can use. They can use still for this game, even for the One Ring.
Yeah, if you're not playing this game, which I wouldn't in 2024, honestly,
Hmm.
but I would go out and get Treasures of Middle-earth source book. I would go out and I would get they have a map pack if you want to play Middle-earth, a map pack with very detailed region maps, wonderful artwork. And it's huge. You can put them all together too, but it would take up like the floor of a room.
Yeah, I mentioned before about Moria. I think they put out so many source books
Yeah.
that there's a certain region of One Ring that they haven't fleshed out yet, but you've been waiting forever. Pick up one of the MERP source books. They have really good information about the NPCs, maps, the lore, everything that you can. It'll take some work to adapt it, but it's possible.
Yeah, and I will say that though I don't know what the license details were that Iron Crown got, but if you read through this, you're going to get a lot of information about Middle-earth that goes like fills in stuff from the Silmarillion all the way up through Lord of the Rings appendices and everything. So they put a lot of information in these books that might not necessarily be covered by licenses that game makers today have. So if you don't know a lot about things, you don't want to read the Silmarillion or Tales of Numenor or whatever, like you can get this sort of summary information from a lot of these books. So, question for you: would you play this game in 2024?
I wouldn't run it. I think the One Ring right now is sufficient enough, rules wise, and um, that it fits what I need at the moment, and I think for my players too. I will only go use MERP as a resource, honestly, for if I want additional information or looking for ideas for adventures.
Yeah, for me, it would be definitely be maps from here, and things like the inspiration from the critical and fumble tables. I love the herbalism. If I can get that into another game somehow, I definitely want that. Um, the adventures themselves, some of them were very high fantasy still.
Hmm.
You know, spellcasters running around everywhere. So I probably wouldn't use that part, but the maps I think are probably the best resource that is useful today.
All right, excellent. Well, viewers, have you played the Middle-earth role-playing game from ICE? What did you think? Do you agree, disagree? Would you still use the Rollmaster system? Or would you combine One Ring with MERP? Let us know in the comments below. I'd like to hear your ideas. So, everyone, thank you for watching. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.